If people can start making their way to their seats, get a cup of coffee, some water. Okay, everybody, so we're going to get started. For those of you who want, please take a seat. It seems like the breakout sessions went really well, and as good community development folks, everyone's having a good time talking to each other. Please do remember that as we wrap up, we are having a gathering at the Hofbrauhaus so that these conversations that you started can continue. But now we have the main event, and I'm going to wait one more second till we got everybody getting situated. What did we joke? Once Chris Alvarado sits down, we can start. I know I had to give you a hard time. I couldn't help it. But we really, again, appreciate all of you being here. We really had a chance this afternoon as we kicked off to hear about the neighborhood platform, how it came together, the importance of this time period in Cleveland's history, and to hear from CDC leaders on their impressions and what they're hoping for from the neighborhood platform. It's now our chance to hear from our candidates. So we'd like to ask Justin Bibb and Councilman Kelly to come up and join us here on the podium. Thank you. And these we have great technology here at CSU, courtesy of Dean Anglin, who's hosting us today, where you don't need to wear a microphone. We can hear you. And nice. Yeah, it's great to
no
be
mute
back.
Button like Zoom, though.
Yeah, no mute button. We're gonna between Ed and me, hopefully we're gonna keep us moving and in check, because everybody's really interested in hearing from both of you. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask a few questions, Ed and I going back and forth, but we're going to start, give you guys each an opportunity to address this group, which is a little different, I think, than many of the groups that you addressed. There's certainly Cleveland voters in this room, but I would say that probably most of these folks would look at you as people they want to partner with, right? These are community development leaders, people who are really passionate about our city, who wake up every day thinking about what's good for residents and what's good for businesses. And so I'm going to give you each a chance to spend just 2 to 5 minutes and speak to this group and tell them a little bit about how you would approach neighborhoods, what you think about the platform that they worked so hard to put together. So I'm just going to start with you, Justin, because you're to my left, and then I promise we'll make sure we trade it up as we go through here. So
well, thank you to CMP for putting together this really informative event. I'm a policy wonk, so I wish I could have been here all day in every session, but unfortunately that's not the case. And I'm really just excited about this discussion and conversation. I think for me, I want to start with my lived experience to set the context. I'm a working class kid. I grew up on 121st and Dove in the southeast side in Mount Pleasant. And I've seen from my own lived experience the importance of stability in the neighborhood. When I was growing up, we had affordable, high quality public transit in my block. My grandma was a major organizer and activist and made sure that we had really strong community policing. And luckily, my parents, although they were divorced, really had access to good middle class jobs. My dad was a fireman. My mom was a social worker, is a social worker rather. And so that lived experience really informs my perspective on the importance of local government in terms of fighting for working class folks all across our city. And as we think about this election and what's at stake, we are truly in a historic opportunity in our city as we plot our post-pandemic recovery as a city. And I believe that now is a time for not only bold, dynamic, visionary leadership in the mayor's seat, but truly a mayor who can be a chief collaborator, because one mayor cannot solve these problems in isolation. And far too long in Cleveland, we've had this mindset that 601 Lakeside Avenue has all the answers. Clearly, that's not the case when you look at the outcomes we see in our city right now. And so as we think about what our post-pandemic recovery looks like, for me, it's really rooted on getting back to the basics. So number one, doing the hard work of lowering crime, but also making sure we reimagine policing and make sure we have true police reform in our city, first and foremost. Secondly, we gotta have a more modern and responsive City Hall. I know that's a big part of the platform you guys put out because the inefficiencies that we see in City Hall day in and day out are only exacerbate the inequities that we see related to child poverty, related to the wealth gap we see in many of our neighborhoods, related to the fact that many of our seniors can't access the basic services they need to really age in place and live a life with dignity. And thirdly, public education. We've seen some great strides in CMSD, but as we look at what education looks like and what the future of work looks like, I believe we have the good foundational elements right now inside CMSD to truly do a better job of focusing on teacher quality, teacher effectiveness, but also making sure we expose our young people in elementary school and middle school about what jobs exist, and bringing back trades and vocational programs in every high school in CMSD must be a key part of that. So excited for the discussion and excited about the campaign ahead and look forward to your questions.
Council President.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for all of the work that you do to better our community. I'm the president of Cleveland City Council, and as president of Cleveland City Council, I represent Ward 13. I represent the Old Brooklyn neighborhood and the part of the Stockyard neighborhood, and I have seen the transformational effect of community development corporations And I've seen neighborhoods where there are high-functioning community development corporations, and those neighborhoods generally do fairly well, or they generally benefit from those services. And I've seen neighborhoods struggle. And those neighborhoods that struggle rarely have a high-functioning, quality community development corporation that they can rely on. So there's an inherent inequity in how we are providing neighborhood services. And if you've been following this campaign, which I assume you have because you're here, one of my main policy initiatives that I am running on is that of neighborhood health equity. And in the neighborhood that I represent of Old Brooklyn, the Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation, I think, has been revolutionary in thinking about what is the future of community development. And one of the main things that the community stood forward and said that we think that public health is a community development issue. And we need to look at the health of our community because, you know, the bricks and mortar only get you so far. The storefront renovations get you so far, the housing assistance. We need to take a snapshot of what is the health of the Old Brooklyn community. And that's where we really started with we didn't just say words, we hired staff to execute this. Starting with a neighborhood health assessment, we made sure that we were reaching out to the community and asking the questions of, do you live within a 10-minute walk of a park? Do you have access to fresh food? Do you feel safe in your home? Do you have a job? Do you know your neighbors to the left and to the right? And from that, we use that to build policy. That's where our farmers market came from. I've told people before that I was very surprised when this assessment came back with the number of people that are on SNAP. But what did we do with it? We used that information to make sure the farmers market was there, that it accepted SNAP, that we had transportation for people to get to the farmers market. But even before COVID, we were pushing for the idea of to develop healthy communities. We need to have a better sense of social connectedness. And the farmers market provided that. Before that, the movie nights, the things that may be intangible, that's there. We had to make sure that community health is a part of community development. But that's just one example of how a forward-thinking community development corporation can lift the community, can put forth those programs that work. And in the time I've been on Cleveland City Council, it is that type of cooperation, it's that kind of neighborhood outreach that gets us to where we want to be. Another thing that our community does that no other communities do, and it started with the help of the Community Development Corporation, was when we launched Old Brooklyn Connected. When we launched the first community-based Wi-Fi system, the 4.5 square miles, it was over 10 years ago. But it was having the community development support that made sure that we pushed forward, and they were the community arm of it. The city owned the capital, and then we had to put the plan together. But it was really that promotion. And if you remember back in the days when there used to be dollars available for digital training access, we had training in the CDCs, at the libraries, the rec centers. CDC's built that. It's the community working together. Those are things we need to do. If we want to, we have to stop talking about broadband access and do it. So broadband access, neighborhood health equity. When we talk about, I saw it in your neighborhood platform, the concept of workforce development. We have to make sure that, we are dealing with the lack of skills that people in our neighborhood have, because there are thousands of open, available, high-paying jobs. But this all has to be part of the same plan. Community development has to be part of it. Community development corporations have to be at the core of it, because we cannot, no one entity can do it alone. And if you look at what we've done working together in Old Brooklyn, I think that that's an example of what we can do citywide. And we look at how the CDC is involved in the Low Park renovation, Old Brooklyn Connected, Farmers Market, neighborhood health equity, you name it. I can't do it alone. I haven't done it alone. I've done it with the great work of the people in the community in Old Brooklyn.
Great, thank you. So Tanya and I have some questions for you guys. And so that everybody knows what to expect, we've got a few different sections. We're going to do questions a few different ways. At the end, we will have Q&A with you guys, all right? So you've got an opportunity, in case you don't hear us, pitch a question that you want to know the answer to, all right? But we're going to go ahead and get started. Tanya, why don't you kick things off?
So I think I mentioned many of you were here, but we started this afternoon with a panel of CDC leaders, and Jamar Doyle, who heads up Greater Collinwood, talked about what was most important to him in the platform and what would be most impactful to him. And it was the municipal infrastructure section. And it was really looking at the fact that the community development corporations are going to be most successful in supporting your vision at City Hall, coming from City Hall, if City Hall is better functioning. And I think we all know that, and I do personally because I was there, right, is that City Hall still looks and feels a lot like it's stuck in the 1990s. And so we want to get a sense from each of you, and we'll start with the council president this time. And what does a 21st century City Hall look like, and what are some of the steps that you'll take to bring that to fruition?
Sure. So City Hall needs to be modernized. City Hall needs to be responsive to its residents, its investors, its partners, everybody that interfaces with 601 Lakeside. And there are many things that we can do. We started as a first step with our language access plan that was instituted, and we trained all of our employees, our forums. You know, there was a up until just a few years ago, everything was English only in the city of Cleveland. But we took that aggressive step to make sure that our language access plan was available to for all of our forums, all of our website, all of our public-facing staff was trained. But we need to make sure that whether somebody's applying for a permit, whether somebody is wanting to invest and be a part in the city of Cleveland, they're treated as such. Nothing makes my blood boil more than when I know about a small business that's trying to open in Ward 13 or anywhere in the city of Cleveland, and they want to have their grand opening, but they haven't had their final electrical inspection. They haven't had a sign off. That's not okay, because we all know, everyone in this room knows, that those small businesses that are trying to open up in our neighborhoods, these are not wealthy people. These are people who's maxed out their credit cards, borrowed from their families and friends. They sleep at their businesses. They pay their employees first, and they don't take a salary so that they can keep people working. These are dreamers. And City Hall cannot be the impediment to their investment being realized. And whether you are somebody who is opening a small business, whether you're putting a deck on your home, or whether you're building a hundreds of millions of dollar corporate headquarters, you're an investor in the city of Cleveland, and you need to be treated as such. We need to do a tech audit of City Hall top to bottom. We need to find out where we're not being responsive. There's certain things that can be solved through technology, and then there's people problems. There is no reason that when you go to get a permit, you need to start in one room and then go to plats, and then go to engineering, then go to sidewalks, and then get your sign-offs, and then come back. It is antiquated. It's got to happen. I know all too well the struggles that community development corporations go through waiting for their contracts to be issued. There's certainly some HUD problems, but there's certainly things we can do better, because the practical effect of that is that those better established community development corporations who can get lines of credit, they can weather that storm a little bit better than those that are less financially on their feet. So we have to make sure that everything we do kind of moves at the speed of business, moves at the speed the community is. And again, there are things that a technology audit, both of what's happening at 601 Lakeside and what's happening community-wide, would reveal a lot of what we can do to improve. But it's really that we need to rework our systems from top to bottom in terms of those people that are wanting to partner and invest in the city of Cleveland need to be treated as such. But as mayor, it's going to start with just a basic cultural shift that if you step foot into City Hall, we are there to serve you. If you are seeking some assistance from City Hall, you're doing it as an investor, a partner, a citizen, and a member of our community. And that's going to be the values of my administration.
Thank you.
You said stuck in the 1990s. In some ways, it's stuck in the 1980s. And the biggest thing that's the impediment, I believe, this is really why I'm running for mayor, is we got to change the culture of city government, because without the culture change, all these great ideas about technology won't be able to get done. And so I intend, as the next mayor, I would intend to really reimagine how City Hall should be structured, not only from a cultural perspective, but from an organizational perspective as we come out of this pandemic, because the way City Hall is structured now should not look like it should be for the next 10, 20, 30 plus years. That's paramount. Secondly, I would say this: why can't we, when you call the mayor's action line, track that complaint like you can track an Amazon package? Why do our seniors have to call 4 or 5 departments to get their grass cut? Why does a family in Detroit Shoreway have to call the rec department to get a schedule for swimming and they have to fax it to them. But you go to Lakewood, Beechwood, Shaker, you can get those services. Even the fact that it's taken us 20 plus years to get smart parking meters. So these are low-hanging fruit items that we can address, I believe, in the near term, that gives us the political will and mandate to really tackle some of these structural things. I would also say this, the idea that, you got to get on 2 buses or pay $10 for parking to come do business with your government, that model is completely outdated. I believe we should do the hard work of using our libraries, our CDCs, and rec centers as a front door for City Hall. So imagine being able to go to the 131st branch of the library in Mount Pleasant, where I grew up, where my grandma could get a birth certificate or a death certificate, or if my uncle wanted to start a business, he can go in that library and start a business at the library. That's critical. And members of my administration should be in the neighborhoods on a weekly basis, because proximity is critical to making sure that we're enacting the right kind of policies to address these systemic issues that have plagued our city for far too long. But it all starts with culture change at the top, and I not only want to run the city, I need to lead the city. And setting that tone at the top is very essential.
I'd like to dig in just a little bit on that. You guys talked about reworking systems, a cultural shift or a cultural change, and our CDC leaders were really clear in the neighborhood platform that they see very clear reorganization within the cabinet and the departments at City Hall. How would you reorganize the departments? Council President Kelly, we'll start with you, and then Justin.
I see that the departments, there is bureaucracy, but we have to determine what is prescribed. Like community development, the Department of Community Development is what you interact with mostly, would be a fair assumption. That and Department of Economic Development, and sadly we need to just kind of determine what HUD guidelines are, what reporting guidelines are absolute, and we need to make sure that people know how to do that. But there's the technical side of community development that needs to be dealt with, but then there's also the process and the visionary side. So I think that we really just kind of need to look at how do we best respond to the providers, where they're at and what their needs are. Clearly the contracts are a very big issue. The storefront renovation. So we need to have a system where we are responding to the needs based on what those needs are, not relying on our current structure. But I think that we have enough information about the types of needs that the providers, that the practitioners need, where we start there and then we build upwards, instead of me saying today that I'm going to kind of make an edict and build downward. We need to start by having a survey of all those that are in the business, where do you see the roadblocks, where are things stumbling, and then build from that.
Thank you. Justin?
Well, part of my decision making will come from a top-down audit I intend to do within the first 100 days of my administration to really inform what does the new structure of City Hall look like. But I have some preliminary ideas. Number one, I intend to appoint a chief racial equity officer in my administration that will work across all city departments to make sure that every decision we make inside City Hall, that it doesn't exacerbate the existing racial inequities that we see in our community. Cities like Birmingham and Tacoma, Washington have already done this. We have good models across the country to follow. Secondly, our Office of Sustainability. I want to change that to an Office of Sustainability and Climate Justice and make that office cross-functional as well, because every major department must have an environmental justice lens and climate justice lens in terms of how we make decisions at the city. I would also say this, I spent some time really studying what Akron has done with their Integrated Office of Economic and Community Development and Urban Planning. I think that's a great model for Cleveland to take a look at, to make sure that the decisions we make in community and economic development, in city planning, and the Mayor's Office of Capital Planning is truly integrated. Because I've talked to many investors, many CDC leaders that are just frustrated with how we make decisions in silos, and we're always paying for our mistakes downstream, and it adds the cost over time. And so we need to be very clear about being honest about what's working, what's not working, and being open to good best practice from across the country, and making sure we get your feedback so we can truly redesign these departments in a more responsible way to better serve the needs of our residents.
Great.
I'm going to kind of piggyback a little bit on this idea of an office of, or leader of racial equity. We really wanted to delve into, I mean, I think this is something we all know, that East Side homeowners are still really clawing back from the 2008 recession, let alone the COVID-19 pandemic that we're still in. And, you know, we have made many attempts to really look at more equitably building our city. But I think it's really important for us to hear from you how you'll look at adopting equitable development practices, how you'll look at bringing those into your administration and operationalizing them in the day-to-day work that you do. And we can start with you, Justin.
Well, I would say this. It's great that we have declared racism as a public health crisis in Cleveland. But as many of you know, we are really good at headlines. We are terrible at execution. And we need to take this serious because we are in a moment right now nationally where people of color continue to be let down by institutional systems that continue to exacerbate the racism that exists in America. And in many cases, Cleveland is a master class of how this has gone wrong. I think we can do a couple things. Number one, as we look at spending over $500 million from President Biden, we need to make sure that that process is transparent, that residents have a voice, and that we engage the voices of the people to make sure we spend this money appropriately. If I were mayor, number one, I would make sure that a large share of that money is spent on bringing back many of our forgotten neighborhoods, particularly in the southeast side. You know, the house I grew up in, where my grandma is still at right now, her housing value has not recovered since 2008. And I think for a long time in Cleveland, we've had a one-size-fits-all approach to economic development. But as we all know, what's working in Detroit Shoreway and Tremont ain't gonna always work in Lee Harvard or Mount Pleasant or Buckeye and Glenville. And so City Hall must be structured in a way, and our departments must be structured in a way to deploy the right tools and the right incentives in conjunction with our CDCs and private investors to make sure that every neighborhood is getting the resources they need, because folks want to see cranes in the sky in Lee Harvard like we see cranes in the sky in Ohio City. That's essential. The other thing I would say is this. You know, I think the abatement policy was a great step in the right direction to grow our population and bring some real investment to Cleveland. But I think now is the time to truly have some hard conversations about re-examining the abatement policy so it doesn't further exacerbate or displace many residents in our city. And the abatement may look different in Tremont than it should in Mount Pleasant, and that's okay. I've talked to so many seniors, particularly on the east side, who are just scared about not being able to be age in place because they're getting displaced or priced out because they can't afford their property taxes. So city government must be an active partner in looking at new solutions to address these age-old issues in our community.
Thank you. If you look at housing in the city of Cleveland, which we all do, we have been, if we go back decades, we had what was known as redlining. And when the financial institutions were caught, they technically stopped doing it, but the blight and the disinvestment were already left there. And then the excuse became, well, we can't invest here, you know, for credit reasons and for, you know, they don't reach certain scores. Okay, so started clawing back out of that through different tools. And then in the housing meltdown of 2007, 8, 9, and 10, we saw predatory lending going into these same neighborhoods, making loans that were not sustainable, bundling them up and selling them on Wall Street, and everybody walked away. And we were left with more blight, more disinvestment, and add to that more vacant abandoned homes, more forgottenness in these neighborhoods. But that being said, that is a reality that we have to claw back out of. And as we go forward, we need to use every tool to incent investment. Now, the tax abatement policy is something that has been an absolute great tool for the city of Cleveland. It caused investment where investment wouldn't otherwise happen. And I think that we needed to use that tool for what it's worth. And that is, we have enough data, we have enough information down to the census block where we can direct the abatement, we can direct the incentive to where it's needed. Maybe certain neighborhoods don't need a full 15. Maybe some neighborhoods need that plus. but we need to use that to incent development. And it's always got to be this mythical, you know, where is this but-for line? But for this abatement, this project would or wouldn't happen. But we also have to take a look at, you know, how do we really encourage development in our neighborhoods? And we have to, as most people in this room know, and I was a sponsor, and Cleveland City Council put the first $1 million into the Middle Neighborhoods Fund. And you know, that fund needs to be continuously invested in. We need to create these loan loss reserve products because the private sector has given up on a lot of our neighborhoods. And we really need to put the incentive there to essentially bring them to the table. It should not be this way, but I like to point to the Glen Village project, for example. So the Glen Village project is a great project at 105th and Ashbury. You know, it's retail, it's apartments, it's beautiful, it's got a courtyard, it's got a nice deck outside, a community space inside. But it took the neighborhood transformation plan to create the incentive for that to happen, to bring the banks, to bring the private sector to the table. It took that investment by the city to bring them there. That shouldn't have had to be, because with Glen Village, they had the same traffic counts that they had before the investment. They had the same purchasing power. They had the same average income of the neighborhood. But for some reason, the private sector didn't want to take it. So we need to look at where do we want investment to be in our city. And we need to use these type of tools, these transformation projects, middle neighborhood, to make sure that we are, you know, investing in Glenville. You know, the 121 Larchmere project, the development that's going to be happening on Buckeye, the development that's going to be happening on West 25th Street outside of Metro Hospital. And then we need to make sure that we are using the tools like the loan loss reserve fund that goes with the middle neighborhood strategy to make sure that homeowners have an opportunity to invest in our neighborhoods, because you know the business along the main corridors is nice, but unless you have the housing, you know, retail follows rooftops, and we got to make sure we have strong, healthy rooftops in every one of our neighborhoods.
Great. So we want to do, I think, one final question before we move on to the next part of this, and I'd like to reference back to our opening plenary session when Rosemary Moudry, the Executive Director of West Park CAM CDC, they're around. Yeah. She was talking about partnerships and collaboration, and everything that you guys have talked about, right, is big. And you need partners on the ground, the way that Tanya talked about, this room full of partners. You need partners who can work with your administration. How do you envision further strengthening the partnership between CDCs, you and your administration? Council President Kelly?
Sure.
Kelly, we'll start with you and move on.
Absolutely. The partnership between myself and CDCs as mayor is going to be the same as it's been between myself and Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation. I don't have to, speculate on what it might look like. I know not just the importance of it. I know that it has been a part of my success. They have been a part of what's really pushed the community forward. And you know, it's easy to, you can't get away from one of these forums without using words like partnership and collaboration. And they're easy to say, but oftentimes what we kind of forget is it's hard to do. You mentioned Rosemary. Rosemary knows the battles we went through just to do the Pearl Road Streetscape project. And when you're dealing with ODOT and what they want because on state roads, when you know what the businesses want. Believe it or not, you know, to a lot of people, a lot of businesses don't love bike lanes, but you have to bring people together. So we can talk about partnership, talk about collaboration. I've done it, and everything that we did from looking at the Pearl Road Streetscape project, looking at how they were part of Old Brooklyn Connected, how it's part of the sponsoring of our movie nights, the farmers market, all those things, putting together the community health model. It's going to be something that I'm going to do because I just believe in it, because you can't move forward without it. And I think that, again, there are essential services that the CDCs provide, and there really is, you can't overstate how easy it is to say collaborate and how hard it is to do it, because there's a lot of different interests. I'm still, there's a very comprehensive bike lane down Broadview Road, and Michael's Bakery will never forgive me. But that's just part of what you go through. You have to listen, you have to bring people together, you have to respect everybody's opinion, and then you have to make hard decisions. But the best decisions are always made working together, and oftentimes not everybody will get what they need, but it's an exercise in good government to make sure that you're listening to everybody who will be affected.
Thank you. Justin?
I got a crash course early in my career when I worked in county government at the ripe old age of 23, working on some education policy work for the county. And I did all this great research and did some stakeholder interviews. And I went to make my pitch to a member of county council. And I gave her my plan. And she says, I don't care about none of that. What's in it for me? Now, I tell you that story because I learned a very important lesson there, that change and collaboration is all about relationship building and trust. And for over a decade, from my work in the private sector and the nonprofit sector and working in government, I've had a front row seat of what works in terms of how to bring people together and what doesn't work in terms of how to bring people together. And as mayor, I truly believe that the best thing I can do and the cheapest, most valuable tool I can use is the power of collaboration. So with CDCs, number one, on November 3rd, I'm gonna reach out to say, how should we redesign the Office of Economic and Community Development to make sure it's more responsive to your needs as CDCs? What should our staffing look like? What kind of talent do you want to see that you can work with in our administration? You should have not only bi-weekly, but monthly meetings with me as the mayor and my team to identify what's working and what's not working. And particularly for the Southeast side, you're gonna need to have a mayor that's actively engaged to make sure we can bring some real jobs and real economic opportunity back to those neighborhoods, because many of our CDCs over there are struggling to survive, and they need our help now more than ever to get going again in the future. And I think the biggest thing that we need now is a mayor who can be humble to know when they have the answers and when they don't have the answer. And if I don't have the answer, it's my job to bring experts around it to make sure I do have the answer so we can solve these problems, and I think that's critical.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So we're gonna make a transition here. And at this point, Tanya's gonna join in on the answers because
I guess she's running for mayor now.
you bet you joined CNP in November?
Yeah.
All right, so here's what we know. Communities are built on our people. And both the candidates running and Tanya are people. And so we've got some questions. What I would like to do is invite you guys to grab a whiteboard and one of the markers. There's an eraser for each of you. We've got some easy questions. I'm gonna pitch them to you. I'd like you to write your answers on the whiteboard. And then we'll just go down the line and reveal the answers, all right? And these are really difficult, so just take a deep breath with me. The first thing I want to know, walleye or perch? All right, we're going to start here.
Okay, walleye?
Perch, but fried.
Walleye.
Love it. All right. Other than Cleveland, what's your favorite city? I really should have Jeopardy music. All right.
All right, other than Cleveland,
Other than Cleveland.
Miami.
New York.
Washington, D.C.
All right.
Huge door.
Okay. Tanya, for this next question, you do have to pretend to be running for mayor.
Okay.
In the mayor's office, you have a candy jar for guests. What kind of candy do you keep in there?
Really hard one.
All right, this time we're going to start with Tanya.
For all those people who have worked for me, they know I always have a candy jar. So, Hershey's Kisses.
Skittles.
Crowd favorite seems to be these Hershey's miniatures.
Oh,
This is
I have
true.
this one.
This is true. I'm a Crackle fan, for anyone paying
Crackers.
attention.
Crackers.
All right.
It's like crunch bars.
Crackle? Oh,
Favorite?
these, those.
It's true. Favorite ice cream shop in Cleveland? See, now we're getting political. Tanya, we're going to start with you again.
Good. Okay, Mitchell's. It's everywhere.
Mitchell's.
Must not be from Cleveland. Honey Hut. Honey Hut. Honey
Love
Hut.
Honey Hut. I do. I love Mitchell's.
Okay, we got just a couple more questions. Where does your favorite Cleveland memory take place? When they heard we were using whiteboards, I saw some sweat beads. Kevin, why don't you get us started?
My home.
At Severance Hall, because my mom graduated from Ursuline and her graduation was at Severance Hall.
Okay. University Circle, Parade Circle.
What is the best depiction of Cleveland on TV, in the news, or in the movies?
Oh, man. That's a good one.
You guys are all thinking too.
He came up with them.
All right. Tanya, why don't you get us started?
Keep starting. Okay. So I'm saying Christmas Story because it's the most fun.
Can I put like a musical thing?
Sure.
Bone Thugs and Harmony?
The Block and the Shot.
Oh. Yeah, that's true.
What is your favorite Cleveland event or festival?
Oh. I already did that.
And the Progress Institute does not count. Why don't you get us started?
All right, these are easy. Edgewater Live.
Pre-COVID mix at CMA.
All right. I'm not sure it's my favorite, but I love the Day of the Dead parade in Torrey Shore Way.
Oh, yeah.
I do really love that.
Okay. All right, this is the last question. Where did you go for your last iconic Cleveland experience?
Iconic.
All right. So it might be going to a Browns game, or just the Muni lot, visiting a Metro Park, or the West Side Market, or the Cultural Gardens. Iconically Cleveland. Really got to think about this. Tanya, why don't you get us started?
Okay. So I just got to do this, kayaking on the Cuyahoga, which is really cool. Yes.
Very cool.
This is historic Cleveland, but the 11th Congressional District Labor Day Parade, Lucas Park.
So Browns game and Indians game in my backyard. Had to watch that one on TV. The last game before the Guardians transition.
Love it. Love it. Thank you guys. Let's give them a round of applause for that one. So we're going to transition into our Q&A with you guys in a minute. So start thinking about what you want to ask, but Tanya's going to introduce our last section, which is going to be brief.
Yes, it's brief, but it's good we let you have some fun. 'Cause now this is, I think, the hardest part, and we're going to be really, really harsh about this, right? We're going to ask yes or no, and you have a moment to think about it, but you just have to say yes or no, no explanations. And even though we should treat you both with great deference, which we will try to, if you try to explain, we're going to cut you off, because we need to get to Q&A, right? So we're going to ask you some yes or no questions, and, you know, just answer as honestly and kind of that gut reaction that you have, okay? All right. So, Ed, you're starting, right?
Okay.
You can ask our first few, and then I'll ask our last couple.
These all come from the neighborhood platform. So if you haven't looked through it yet, do so, and you will find these in there. So, Justin, will you commit to convening CDC leaders, your cabinet, and council leadership on a bi-monthly basis? Yes or no?
Yes.
Council President?
Yes.
Will you commit to working with the community development industry to rethink how the city funds and works with CDCs? Council President?
Yes.
Yes.
Since 2004, Cleveland has had a tax abatement program. We've been here. Will you commit to working with us, the community development industry, City Council and other stakeholders to update the city's tax abatement policy before it needs to be reauthorized? Justin?
Yes.
Council
Yes.
President? Thank you.
All right, here am I. Will you work with outside partners to launch a comprehensive marketing plan for Cleveland and all of its neighborhoods?
Yes.
Justin? Council President?
Yes.
Okay. Cleveland's zoning laws are antiquated. They do not work for anyone anymore. Will you work with council to pass and implement form-based zoning?
Yes.
Yes.
Finally, will you work with CDCs, CNP, and other partners like CHN Housing Partners, the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Enterprise, and the Greater Cleveland Partnership, so they're just examples, to bring home capital dollars from the State House for neighborhood projects? Council President?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So,
Great.
as you can tell, they weren't that one. We want to give credit where credit is due. Your former council person, Matt Zone, suggested, hey, you got to ask him yes/no questions, and we really did try during throughout the platform, right? To have
Yeah.
things that are really actionable. You know, one of the things Ed and all of us were committed to, they were things that would be a blueprint, things that you could really move forward with on day one and begin impacting our neighborhoods. So, Colleen has the microphone, right? You remember she said she could be a good game show host. So, and whoever has the first question for our candidates. Someone gets to hold the mic.
Uh-oh.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Shefton. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development for Famicos Foundation. Just really quickly, so we've heard so many of the things that you all want to do. But the reality is, for those of us who work in the community development industry, we know how difficult it is to do the job at City Hall. So, using specific examples, what are the things that need to happen in order to bring your dreams to life? What are the things that must structurally change? Not new departments. I'm talking about unions. I'm talking about stayed and long professionals who have been in these organizations. What are the things that you plan to do to ensure that you can bring your vision for the city of Cleveland to life?
You thought we had hard questions.
Do either of you want to tackle that first?
Go ahead.
Sure. Absolutely, when you are dealing with systems, change is hard. And it really needs to start with the vision of the mayor, and it's got to start with those first hires that you make. It's really those making sure that you have a cabinet that's responsive to you, that reflects your values, and getting that right is critical, and that's got to happen on the front end. Oftentimes, people just get used to the way business has been done, and that becomes normal. And we have to just create a new normal. We have to really evaluate where the roadblocks are. We have to explain where sometimes there are roadblocks that can't be moved, but we need to do a better job of communicating, what the issues are. But I think, when you talk about how do I as mayor execute the vision that I have, it starts with an understanding that I know I can't do it by myself, that I will only be as strong as the team that I surround myself with. And the best way to do that is to begin with soliciting input from those that are subject matter experts, listening to people, relying on the relationships that I've built as a member of City Council for all these years, and really just making sure that I get it right with that first batch of hires, to make sure that is reflective of the new culture of city government, and we're going to be committed to pushing things through. We did when I say we, the current administration did an Operations and Efficiency Task Force, and there's a lot of recommendations, but there's a lot of those recommendations that have not been executed on. There's a lot we can look to. We just have to really do an evaluation of where we are, but it has to be part of that first team that I hire.
I think we have a political will problem in Cleveland. Number one, the next mayor must truly treat council like a co-equal branch of government. and must include them as a shared governing partner to execute our shared vision for the city. And I intend to go above and beyond to do that if elected mayor. I think secondly, and I've been seeing this on the doors as I've been campaigning across the city, we have a democracy problem in Cleveland because we as aspiring elected officials and current politicians, we only come knock on the door every 4 years if we actually knock on the door. And then we come again and ask for a vote when it's time for re-election. And we don't engage in democracy building beyond an election cycle. And I, as mayor, must really embed door knocking to talk about issues when I'm in office so that we're connecting the role of government to their daily lived experience every day, because if we do that, you get higher voter turnout. And I think that's a major problem in Cleveland, and I think at large, we got to change our politics. That's how we build the long-term change I think we need in Cleveland.
Hi,
She's not
my name
playing with
is
that one.
Alex Abramowitz. I recently took a position in the city's Department of Building and Housing. I thoroughly believe in the power of local government. Nonetheless, reflecting on my experience thus far, I have to ask you both, what will you do to make the city an employer that attracts, retains, and fully utilizes the region's top talent?
I can take that one. Number one, change management just can't be something we talk about, right, at the cabinet table. It's got to be something that we're doing for frontline city service employees, for middle management, and for you as well. You should be able to talk to me as mayor on a continuous basis. You should be able to talk to your cabinet head daily and get that kind of feedback you need, so you feel like you do have a voice, so you can do your job every day with purpose. The other thing I would say is this: recognition. We got to recognize the good work that you're doing every day and feel like that you're getting commended for your hard work as a City Hall employee. I'll also say this: we are sitting in the #2, I believe, Dean, and apologies if I'm wrong with the ranking, Dean, the #2 urban policy school in America. This should be the foundation for the next mayor, the next chief of staff, right, for the next head of building and housing. This is the training ground right here. And we should be using this institution as an extension of City Hall to modernize city government for the 21st century in an equitable way. And that's what I intend to do if elected mayor.
Thank you, and I appreciate the question. I appreciate what you do for the city, because I know it's a hard job. I know it's a difficult environment to operate in building housing right now. I have supervised many people in my past, and I know that that an employer that feels valued, that feels that they are a part of the progress of the operation, is a better employee. I believe in the philosophy that, you know, my job as the employer of 7,500 people is going to be to make sure that those employers are happy, because those employees are happy, because they will then provide better service. There will then be better buy-in. And, you know, just a few things that I've proposed. If you go to my website, I think one thing that I intend to do on day one is institute paid parental leave, both for mothers and fathers, so that we can attract families. We can attract, you know, young families that want to work for the city of Cleveland. I've heard too many stories about, you know, it's mostly been women, but that chose to leave the city as opposed to deal with the very narrow family leave policy. And I think those are the types of things that we need to do on day one. We need to make sure that we are doing education reimbursements. We need to make sure that we're providing the full, you know, the full cohort of benefits that are competitive with the private sector. I also know that it's not about money. People that come to work for the city of Cleveland are not doing it for the great salary. It really is being part of this movement, being part of the team, being part of the mission. And, you know, I think that if you ask people I've supervised throughout my lifetime, I'm pretty sure you're going to find that they believe I treat them quite fairly, and that I value them, and I value you for what you do with the city of Cleveland. And I think that, for example, building and housing is an absolutely critical department in the city of Cleveland. We're dealing with, you know, over 4,000 vacant abandoned houses. We're dealing with housing code issues. We're dealing with, you know, all kinds of blight issues. And I know you don't have enough staff. I know you're understaffed. I know that a lot of divisions are. So We have to get this right, but real change, we can talk about being the mayor. I mentioned earlier about my cabinet getting that right, but real change happens down with the other 7,500 employees that are doing the work of the city of Cleveland.
Hi, so as both of you know, Cleveland's lost 6% of its population in the last 10 years and 200,000 people or 100,000 people over the last 20 years. So what would you do to get the population to climb back up, rebuild the tax base, and attract more young residents?
Sure. So, oh, do you want? Okay. So first off, I would, this census I believe represents an undercount, but it doesn't matter because the census is the census, and that's what the federal government will use. But I think we have to really look at the city of Cleveland in terms of, that's not the only indicator of our success. We can look at the productivity of our people, that we did, the amount of productivity per capita, GDP per capita. There's a lot of good things that happen under those numbers. That being said, as we move forward, how do we get more people here? We need to start looking at the fundamental, what I consider instability of our economy, and that is that we have too many open, available, high-paying jobs and not enough people to fill them, not enough people that are properly trained and skilled. That might seem counterintuitive because you would think that there's jobs, people would come to them. But we don't have a culture where businesses can expand because they can't rely on the fact that they can move to additional 50, 100 employees. If you're a tech startup, for example, you're just not sure that's going to happen. I'm not the type of person that's waiting for the next big thing to follow this guy. I think the civic energy that went into the Amazon HQ2 was silly and counterproductive, but as much as I like to poke fun at that, the reason we didn't even get shortlisted isn't because we didn't have, it wasn't because of the weather or the taxes, because we didn't have the people that could fill those. But as a short-term solution, one thing that I'm very interested in pursuing is right now is an opportunity where we need to be more welcoming to our immigrant and refugee populations. I think right there is an opportunity to really stabilize our population. And if you look at what's happened in Chicago and Philadelphia and why their population stabilized to a certain extent, a lot of it is those that are not native-born Chicagoans or Philadelphians. And right now, when you look at what's happening across the world in Afghanistan, there's just tremendous opportunity to be a welcoming city. And my wife is from Utica, New York, and that is just a fantastic example of how a city was a very welcoming community during the Bosnian crisis, and a city that was struggling, neighborhoods that were declining to terrible rate, businesses that were going out of town. It flourished. It stabilized that community, and now all the literature about the Mahoning Valley is how are we keeping the children of refugees in the Mahoning Valley because they're getting college educated, they're moving out, which is a good problem to have. But that is, to me, the opportunity we need to take. We need to double down on what we're doing with refugee response. We need to double down on what Global Cleveland's doing. We have to be this welcoming city, and this is a fantastic opportunity to move forward on that.
I think what you've seen over the last several decades in Cleveland is we have a managing decline mindset versus a growth and prosperity mindset. What Pittsburgh did well, what Nashville did well, what Indianapolis did well, after 2008 and the Great Recession, they made some big, bold bets, but also did the hard work of getting back to the basics to really grow their economies, and now they're well positioned as some of the best mid-sized cities in America. And coming out of this pandemic, we got to do the exact same thing, because in this age of the emerging Zoom economy, talent wants to go where they can have great bike lanes, affordable public transit. They want to feel welcomed. They want to feel like the city's inclusive. They also want to feel safe and secure. And they also want to make sure that there is a pathway for them to lead and grow in this city. And I've said this before, Cleveland has a very terrible relationship with risk. We are one of the most risk-averse towns in America. We were so bad, Rockefeller had to leave. And until we change that, our relationship with risk at the city level, we're going to continue to be in this managing a decline mindset versus being more proactive. I would also say this, the city must be a better partner with the county. That's critical. And until we fix that relationship, we're going to continue to see a missed opportunity after missed opportunity to maximize all the great assets we have as a region to one day grow our population, because with the right leadership in place, I think over the next decade we can grow by over 100,000. And that's a bold goal, but we should think big and bold. It's okay. It's okay.
So I want to kind of build on that concept of attracting people and growth, and hoping the two of you can speak to how regional and state policies impact our ability to be a growing city, and how, as mayor, you might have a different relationship with the region and our state in order to build better policy.
Why don't you take that
Yeah.
since you started and then.
Yeah, let me start with the state. One is immediately a layup for the next mayor. Right now, Cleveland is one of the only cities that's not a part of the Ohio Mayor's Alliance. You got Columbus, Dayton, Toledo, Cincinnati, a part of that alliance, making sure we have a shared policy agenda to support Ohio's largest cities with our governor and state legislature. That's critical to make sure we get our fair share of investments for public transit, for housing, for access to high-speed broadband, infrastructure investments, et cetera. Secondly, as it relates to the county, for far too long in Cleveland, it's been about protecting political interest versus how does the mayor and the county executive, how do we grow the pie together? So one thing I've been thinking about, particularly in economic development, I talk to many investors who want to invest in Cleveland and current CEOs. They don't know who to call. Do I call the mayor, Team Neo, county executive, GCP? Do I call Tanya at CMP? Who do I call?
Yes, call Tanya.
Yeah. and one idea I've been floating out there is a regional cabinet for economic and community development between the city and the county, and Jumpstart and our chamber and Team NEO to make sure that we have a shared value proposition as we go to market and a shared value proposition as we retain companies. And you saw how important that was with Sherwin. We were this close to losing Sherwin-Williams because we didn't have our stuff together. And it's important that we not miss these moments because we want to manage our own political interests versus how do we grow the pie together as a collective.
Council President?
Thank you. The mayor of the city of Cleveland is really the mayor of Northeast Ohio in a lot of ways. The city of Cleveland is the central business district of the region. And what happens in Cleveland affects a lot more than just Cleveland. And we really need to understand who our allies are and who we need to work, we have to take more adverse positions with. I'll tell you, as far as the state goes, the state has not been our friend. Joining an alliance is not going to make sure that we get our fair share for public transportation. We need to do a better job. I intend to do a better job as mayor of joining with the mayors of the other big 8 cities and combining your political power, because we are taken for granted in Columbus. We are, the income that is generated in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, we are a donor city and a donor county, and we give more to the state than we get back, and we have to just have an aggressive policy towards that. We need to make sure that we are getting from the state, what we give to it, and then some, because this is not, there's a time when you've got to take, a strong position, and you've got to let the state know that, we are being underserved in terms of what is our investment towards the state. That being said, we need to have, policies like NOACA developed. We need to work close with NOACA in terms of how we're going to fund transportation projects for, for rural areas where there's not a lot of population. We have to have that kind of thinking moving forward. We need to make sure that, the county has interests that can be aligned with the city of Cleveland, sometimes in planning, sometimes in health, and when we have to work together to maximize the, the economic power of the city of Cleveland, and the economic power of Northeast Ohio. I think we underestimate that. I think we undervalue it. And, I think that we need to do a much better job at making sure that our voices are heard in Columbus, and they can't be heard alone. It's got to be heard with the mayors of the other big cities. We have to have a common urban agenda, and we need to make sure that we there's political consequences if you mess with Cleveland, because right now we are not getting back. It's unacceptable what's happening in the city of Cleveland when you look at where transportation dollars are spent, where infrastructure dollars are spent. It's not coming to where the need is, and it's not coming from where the money comes from. But that being said, there has to be some partnership, because there are some ways that the state can be helpful. When we started first year Cleveland, we got $10 million our first year of operation from Ohio Medicaid. So we have to look at where partnerships are possible, but where we need to really stake out our position, work with other big city mayors, and stick to it, because we are not, Columbus is not our friend when it comes to transportation dollars, when it comes to workforce, when they struck the Fannie Lewis law, and I could go on for a long time, but I'm going to stop right there before I ruin my day. So thank you.
So I just want to recognize we've got time for 2 more questions.
Great.
So I believe it was Councilman Kelly talked on it for a second about the contracts that all of us have to go with and how the lengthy periods of time. I've got residents that have waited over 1.5 years for their rebates, and I have to tell them on a daily basis, we're waiting on the city. Me personally, waiting on the contract for my CDC, I had to drop part-time working nearly full-time hours to keep us afloat because we were waiting on our money from the city. What would be your plan to make this more efficient, that we can get the resources we need to better serve our communities?
So with the contracts, with those are reimbursable services, which is where the challenge lies, because these services have to be submitted for payment. But I don't know for sure, and I don't like to say anything that I can't absolutely do. But what I believe can happen is, some of that money can be front-ended from other revenue sources, then reimbursed. Whether it's general fund dollars or some other way of getting the money out the door. All I know for sure is that the example you gave are all too common, but it really is it's a real thing when CDCs have payroll to meet and there's no check. And while some of the bigger CDCs, some more successful CDCs can get that line of credit, many can't. And if they can get that line of credit, it doesn't come for free. It comes with a cost, and it's something that you shouldn't have to rely on that kind of funding to get it done. So I don't want to be disingenuous and promise an answer I can't deliver, but I assure you it's a priority of mine.
I would, to your question, I would say a couple things. Number one, we got to examine these processes and just cut the red tape and make sure we work with the right staff internally at City Hall to cut the red tape. Now, if there's a barrier to cutting the red tape, this is where partnerships truly matter. And we saw during COVID, a lot of organizations like the Cleveland Foundation, CNP, were using leverage to get money on the street faster than what government could do. And it's okay to look at those different kind of models, and that's where I think true public-private partnerships come into place, but we got to cut the red tape at the end of the day.
Make home ownership more accessible to the younger professionals in Cleveland through 3 lenses. The deteriorating housing stock, those who are struggling with student loans, and then also competing against larger entities that don't need a conventional loan product and go in with cash offers.
Drew is speaking from absolute experience. He is a new employee moving to the city, and I lost out on 3 homes, and finally just decided to rent because.
I'm in the same boat here as well, as I'm trying to get on a path to getting a home one day soon. Go Renters, by the way. I see you, Chris. A couple things. One, this is where bringing our banking partners to the table is very important. And many parts of our city, particularly in the east side, they're not lending. And it's important that the next mayor hold our banking partners accountable to make sure we can lend in a responsible and equitable way. That's essential. Secondly, more partnerships with organizations like CHN so that we can get money on the street and get people access to a home. That's critical. And I would also say this, we have tons of abandoned lots, tons of vacant homes in our city. And I think city residents should be first in line, not last in line, because right now they're last in line, to have access to these properties, because that's how you truly build, not only build back the block, but buy back the block and build real wealth in our communities. And the city must be a key partner with our banking partners, with our various land banks as well, to make sure we make that pathway easier And the county's got to play a role in this because there's many of these properties that have liens on them, and the county's yet to foreclose on those properties. So we got to bring the county to the table in this conversation as well, too, I believe, long term.
So home ownership in our neighborhoods leads to stability in our neighborhoods. So we really need to do what we can to encourage home ownership. I talked a little bit earlier about some of the products that are available in terms of loan loss reserve fund for middle neighborhoods, but we have to make sure that there are also dollars available, programs available for home renovation for those properties that are not ready to be demoed, that can be brought back to productive reuse. And we need to make that available to people seeking to purchase a home in the city of Cleveland. We saw what the land bank can do when they make the properties available. We've seen programs where you are able to get a house for very cheap, but the requirement is that you bring it up to code within a certain period of time. I think that we can do a lot with these vacant abandoned homes. There are neighborhoods that I think would support, the market would support them. There are the ability for the land bank to make those properties available for a nominal sum and have the purchaser, bring them up to code has been very successful. Our land bank, our lot disposition needs to improve, but really just looking at those different products, 20% for a home is a lot. To put 20% down is a lot. I don't know where people get this kind of money, especially with the way housing prices are going. But if a buyer is otherwise qualified, but they can only put down, $10,000, to me that sounds like a pretty good buyer if they've got, $10,000 saved. If the appraisal gap is if there's an appraisal gap because the appraiser doesn't understand the dynamics of the neighborhood, that should not be something that prevents a homeowner from investing in our neighborhood. There are many things that we can do to make it easier to purchase in our neighborhoods, because we have 4,000 vacant abandoned homes waiting for demo. We have more of those that are vacant abandoned but not on the demo list. There's plenty of opportunity to turn that into opportunity for our residents.
I think that was a perfect question to end on. Thank you, Drew, for that. I'll make the pitch that there's a 10-year housing plan. I think Director Wackers may have had to leave us that is a real beacon from a community development perspective, and one of our recommendations is that the next administration and City Council really review that housing plan, see what makes sense for them and begin to implement it. And so much of what you both talked about is part of that plan. So as we wrap up today, first I really want to thank both of you for taking the time to be here with us. I think you have an audience that understands the power of public service, does really appreciate that the two of you have more than put your lives on hold, that it is not easy to put yourself out there, and so we are very appreciative, and I think that that's really important. We're really appreciative of all of you because, again, I'm looking at it, so many of you helped put the neighborhood platform together, who either work for the city today, work for a CDC, work, as I think you said, Council President Kelly, most of us are not here because of the massive paycheck, right? It's because we really love our city, because we really see a bright future, and I think that we're so appreciative again of you guys being here, because I think these are the partners who are really hoping to move forward with you. And then I would be remiss if I didn't take just one moment again to thank the college for hosting us. This was a big step to do this, to have an in-person event. And then finally, before I let you go and have you hopefully head to Hofbrauhaus to have a drink on CNP and maybe a little snack, I really want to thank Ed and Colleen, who worked tirelessly to bring this neighborhood platform together. And last, the whole team that put the event on. So thank you, no more thanks. Have a wonderful evening. Great.
Thank you.